What do you get if you take Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader and America's Next Top Model and slam them together? It turns out you get a rather bizarre show that is cheesy, messy, and turned out to be really exemplary of the entire trash reality TV genre, but at the end of the day it was still really entertaining. This is the Recap Episode, a weekly podcast about exploring and analyzing reality TV shows season by season. I'm your host, Walker, and I use my social science background to investigate reality TV shows. I uncover what they have to say about their casts and the communities they belong to. In this episode, I am talking about 2007 VH1 reality competition show, America's Most Smartest Model. There's a stereotype that models, be they catalog or fashion models, or some other third thing, are particularly dense, not very intelligent, and not very sophisticated in academic matters. This show wants to challenge that, or at least it says it does. The entire premise of, again, this reality competition show was to pit models against each other, those who auditioned and believed themselves to be America's Most Smartest Model, allegedly, in a series of challenges where they'll be eliminated one by one until we crown someone with the title of America's Most Smartest Model, one who can effectively balance both intelligence and modeling skill. Now, I thought the show was just going to be mean. Get a bunch of models in, make them do intellectual challenges that they'll do poorly in, and then use editing and reality story production magic to make them look like absolute fools, right? And part of that is still there. What I got instead was a somewhat earnest attempt at showing that not all models fit that stereotype, or at least that's also what I thought was happening. And then the show twisted and turned and became something so strange and almost Cronenberg-esque, which is a pun without even realizing it. I'll explain that shortly. That I was just mystified and enraptured with what was going on with this show. So I'm super excited to talk about it. I had never watched this show before. I think I had heard about it in passing every now and then because I was a big America's Next Top Model fan. And I won't lie, I am opportunizing a little bit on the recent release of Tyra Banks' documentary about the making of America's Next Top Model and the public opinion of her and that show, and also the upcoming other documentary about Next Top Model that features those who were not invited to participate in Tyra's documentary, such as Lisa D'Amato and Janice Dickinson. But instead of watching Next Top Model, I decided to watch a different model show, which is this one, America's Most Smartest Model, which you could attempt to say is a little bit of a parody of America's Next Top Model in format, but what they do with it again is so started interesting and then went strange and then got more interesting, but in kind of a I can't look away kind of manner. So before I get into everything, I just want to say that you can watch America's Most Smartest Model pretty easily. Most of the episodes are available on YouTube, on the Banna J Reality YouTube channel. All of the episodes are available on Tubi. I recommend watching on Tubi because the ads are less intrusive there. They have all the episodes, and they're uncensored. The only downside to Tubi is that you won't have captions, which can be a little difficult with names and one particular model's accent on the show. So this show comes to us from the minds of two superstars in the world of reality TV production, Mark Cronin and Chris Abrigo. Both of them have extensive resumes. It would take forever to cover them all, but I do want to cover how we got here. So Mark Cronin started his entertainment media career by working in The Howard Stern Show in the early 1990s. Then in 95, he moved to LA and worked for MTV on the dating show Singled Out with Chris Hardwick and Jenny McCarthy. And eventually he became showrunner. Then he moved to Fox in 96. And in 97, he founded a production company, Mindless Entertainment. Now we have to switch to Chris Abrigo. Chris got his initial work at MTV working on The Real World and Road Rules. And then later on, he would create his own production company, 51 Pictures. In 2003, 2004, Mark and Chris would merge their little production companies together to create a new one. And then one of the first things they would make as a team was Surreal Life, and then they'd go on to make a bunch of what you could call celeb reality shows together. And really, that's all I have to say about the history and where this show came from. Just that it came from two great minds of the genre. Couldn't really find much else out. I thought there'd be more out there, but there really wasn't. It seems like this show has kind of been forgotten to time, which probably for the better that it was forgotten and left behind. I've stalled plenty enough. Let's get into the recap and talking about this show. So, it aired from October 7th to December 16th, 2007, again on VH1. The show is hosted by Mary Alice Stevenson, who is described online as a philanthropist and fashion editor. She doesn't have her own Wikipedia page, and it's hard to find a lot of bio information about her that is just about her and her experience. But she does have a nonprofit, Glam for Good, that does work in at least New York State. And Glam for Good has a Wikipedia page, as well as a website, which again does have a bio, but again focuses mostly on Mary Alice's work within the Glam for Good nonprofit. Mary Alice also serves as a central judge, primarily of the modeling ability of the contestants. Mary Alice is joined by Ben Stein, who serves as the main judge of the intelligence and the smartness of the models. Ben Stein is, of course, notable for being the teacher in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. He began his career as a speechwriter for Presidents Nixon and Ford before moving into the entertainment world, but still remaining some connections to, the investment world and a few other things. All I'm going to say is here he's called, the so-called smartest man in America, who only a year later from the airing of this show would be very, very wrong about the 2008 recession. Ben is here to help run the show. He tends to deliver and oversee the academic challenges, while in contrast, Mary Alice delivers and oversees the modeling challenges. Ben's other purpose here is to serve as a comedic juxtaposition. Anytime the models are doing something particularly inept, he's there usually to deliver a witty one-liner filled with high vocabulary words, and then by contrast, make the models look even more foolish, and also to make these references that no one in the room gets, because of course they don't, and do it all while of course speaking in that very monotonous, droning voice that he is well known for. So, episode 1, the first thing we hear is narration from Ben Stein, and I am not going to try to do his voice. I would not do it justice, unfortunately. But he says, "Models. They're sexy, they're stylish, and if conventional wisdom holds true, they're all dumber than a box of rocks. We decided to put that theory to the test, so we put out a call looking for models who think they're smart. But who can judge which combination of looks and attitude make a truly smart model?" We're then introduced to Mary Alice Stevenson. We're told she's a celebrity stylist, a contributing fashion editor at Harper's Bazaar, and she's worked previously for Vogue, Marie Claire, and Allure. Mary Alice greets her 16 contestants and says that the title of the show is a joke, but the competition and the stakes are very, very real. She's then joined on stage and on screen by Ben Stein. We're told of some of his accolades, and of course one of the models recognizes him mostly from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Mary Alice explains what is at stake for the winner of this competition. Of course, the title of America's Most Smartest Model, but also $100,000 prize to the ultimate winner delivered by VO5, and they'll also appear in a campaign for VO5. But first, we have to take the 16 potential contestants down to 14. They're already getting rid of 2 of them. The next thing we see is all 16 contestants getting called up in front of Mary Alice and Ben, and for them to kind of just talk about their educational background and their modeling background. There are 16 of them, so they don't have a lot of time to give us all the information about every single contestant. There are a few that stand out that are basically bigger characters than other people, And I'm not going to throw names at you for now, just because, again, there's 16 of them, and we're about to lose 2. There are, of course, some stereotypes here, people that just embody those stereotypes, I should say. We do learn that there is a spectrum of both educational and modeling backgrounds. We have a couple people who have college degrees and their own honors. We have one PhD student in the crowd. Then we have one model who has worked successfully as a fashion model with a pretty decent resume behind him. And then, again, a spattering of modeling for everyone else. Some have done catalog, a few have done runway and fashion. There's some random, brand names dropped, like Abercrombie. Mary Alice summons a bottom 3. That's how they do the eliminations for this show. They'll summon 3, tell one of them that they're safe, and then for the bottom 2, they, build up the stakes and the tension in, like, the last 5 minutes of the episode, and then save one and send one home. They do the same thing here, even though we're only 10 or so minutes in to knock this 16 down to 14. These bottom 3, we have Mandy Lynn, who is going to get a characterization as we go forward of being a little too pornographic, is usually how they describe her. Ben Stein's kind of staring at her a little too much. But also she's got a ton of makeup on. Her hair is 2 or 3 different colors, a mixture of blonde and brown. And Mary Alice kind of really wants her to tone things down. The other 2 in this bottom 3 for this first elimination are a model named Slavko, who seems like he has some misaligned goals, and that maybe acting might be more what he is looking for. Although, he was in VH1's Kept with Jerry Lewis before this show. And then the other one in the bottom 3 is Jamie. She's singled out for being previously a pageant girl, who I believe also was briefcase number 24 on Deal or No Deal. But she's got a horribly orange, fake tan, giant hair, very 2006-2007 fashion there. Mary Alice, summoning these bottom 3, she says, well, I'm faced with 2 lingerie models and 1 Slavko. She really doesn't know what to do with him at all. And for the choice to send 2 home, Ben actually comes to Mandy Lynn's defense here, and he thinks it impressive that she taught herself how to build websites. So Mandy Lynn is saved, and we axe Slavko and Jamie, who were legitimately only on screen for, again, 10 minutes total. From here we go directly into information for the models about their next challenge, which will be a spelling bee with fashion and modeling related words. And then the models are set free in the mansion that they will be staying in. Of course, the main entertainment in this show comes from the challenges and the developing dynamics of alliances and rivalries and the relationships between these contestants and how those progress, especially as the challenges get more difficult, the stakes get higher, and everyone gets tired of each other, honestly. But then at the same time, especially with these competition shows, recording some of the downtime at the cast accommodations makes for really simple and engaging reality TV. Especially if you have a good collection of personalities that are going to cause conflict, which is easy to make good TV content out of. We and the models learned that all of the bathrooms and the fridge in the house have locks on them. And those can only be opened by answering trivia questions, usually the answer will be a number that they put into a keypad. And these questions, it seems, they change every episode, so who knows how often they change those out, but they'll be different, maybe it's asking about a date, asking them to solve a math problem. At one point it was, what's this number? It's written in Roman numerals, what is it in Arabic numerals, So they're constantly being quizzed on their smartness, is what we're learning through that. We also get some contestant dynamics for this little in-between thing, particularly mostly everyone's dislike of Andre, the Soviet/Russian/Romanian model, and then also Andre's dislike of all the Americans. I will get into Andre a lot more later. I want to cover all the episodes and then kind of go into sort of individual character studies, because the cast here actually is really, really good for that. Now we also finally get the episode format. It's explained to the contestants, but then of course that's mostly for the audience to understand what's going on as well. So each episode will have 2 challenges. This is a very typical reality competition show format. They've been doing it since the 2000s, and it's been carried forward into current day 2026, even brand new shows love to use this format because it's tried and true and it works. So the first challenge is usually a smaller one. They call it the Edge Challenge here. Typically, this will have something to do with the intelligence and knowledge in some discipline or domain. This is kind of like their smartness check. Whoever wins the Edge Challenge gets an advantage for later. And then the later challenge in each episode is called the Callback Challenge. This is always a modeling-focused challenge. Although, depending on what they're doing, Mary Alice and Ben will also judge them on their strategy and their cleverness when it comes to approaching the challenge. Again, trying to figure out who is the most smartest model. Whoever wins the Callback Challenge automatically earns a spot in the next episode. That is your winner for the week, winner for the episode. They're the one definitely moving on. So our first Edge Challenge is this spelling bee. It's a very typical one. Mary Alice tells us that the first round words are super easy in order to boost the model's confidence. So we start with words like blue, bikini, Chanel, etc. And then as the rounds go on and models are progressively eliminated, the words get more difficult. So such as collagen, egocentric, augmentation, emaciated. There's a fourth round that specifically she includes fashion related words. So like Louis Vuitton. And then round 5, that is our final round, we're down to 2 of the models, Jesse and Daniel. Daniel is the PhD student that I mentioned earlier. And Daniel ends up winning the spelling bee, so he gets the first Edge advantage, which is a preview of the Callback Challenge he'll be doing later, and that he should prepare to be able to name as many species of dinosaurs as he can. During what I like to call the in-betweens, which is when they're filming the models, the contestants at the mansion, the house, just to see what's going on, we get some interactions between them. Particularly, we're highlighting a model named Gaston, who is Argentinian and is being very gross and making advances on every single woman in the house in like horribly disgusting ways. The Callback Challenge for this episode is a fashion show on the runway. H&M has sent over some clothes, left some product placement, and Mary Alice has brought in the runway director of LA Models, Krista Clayman, to help them with some prep for their model walks. She gives some advice that is taken very well by some of the models, particularly Mandy Lynn, mentioned earlier, and one named Erica, who is super duper short and kind of walks like a robot. Andre, the Soviet, who is the one with kind of the most modeling experience out of the entire group, especially when it comes to like fashion modeling specifically, and not so much just like catalog. He is super duper confident, so he doesn't really take any assistance from Krista for prep for this Callback Challenge. So the challenge itself, they must walk the runway. Simple, normal, they should be used to that. But then Ben will give them a category, and they have to list as many items from the category as they can think of while they are walking. They're judged on both the modeling and the list they produce. We have some guest judges here, Olga Iriano, who's a photographer and the booking agent for Harper's Bazaar, and then Luke Story, who is a celebrity stylist. Some of the lists, the categories that are told to the models include naming U.S. states, cities outside of the U.S., things that are round, types of trees, names of islands, world leaders, dead or alive, types of drugs, elements in the periodic table, of course Daniel and his species of dinosaurs, and types of flowers. I left a few out because I'm not going over all 14. The biggest one I'll point out here is Mandy Lynn. Her performance here earns her the title of the episode. There's usually a quote that is what the episode is named after. So Mandy Lynn is told to name things that are round. She comes up with balls, cherries, balloons, and tires. And then also balls, cherries, balloons, and tires. And she just repeats that the whole time. She tells us in the confessional that she thought of coming up with a few words and just repeating the list would help her out and help her focus. Her judgment, unfortunately, from the judges, not only was this not great, Olga says she's not very fashion. Luke says she's, again, a little too pornographic. And Mary Alice, at this point, starts pushing this idea that Mandy Lynn needs a makeover. We need to fix things. The winner of this Callback Challenge ends up being a model named Brett. So he's our first winner, making an early first impression. on not only the audience as someone to look out for, but also for the judges, for someone that has pretty high potential. Pre-elimination, there's some other dynamics developing, some other relationships. We do see Mandy trying to take off as much of her makeup as possible so that when she goes to elimination, she's following what Mary Alice asked her to. Which I do have to commend Mandy. Just a minor spoiler, she doesn't make it far, but she was a very good competitor, very good for TV, and a very good sport about this entire thing. Andre is pissing people off because he's a cocky asshole. No one likes Andre for the first half of the competition, but eventually they warm up to him very interestingly. At elimination, Mary Alice will sometimes give comments to anyone who she thinks needs those comments, but then of course she'll pull down the bottom 3 to point out what they did wrong specifically and how they may or may not be saved before the actual decision. One particular model she points out here that isn't in the bottom 3 is Jessie, who has a little bit of a tummy, and she basically says, "Hey Jessie, there's a gym downstairs. I want you to use it." That's going to be Jesse's storyline for the rest of his time on this show. Our bottom 3 are Mandy Lynn, as mentioned before. Mary Alice says she is the epitome of what she did not want to find in this competition. We have Gaston, the one I previously mentioned that was being gross to all the women. He had a bad look, he had a bad walk, and he acts like he doesn't care. And then a model named Victoria, who I just haven't mentioned at all yet. She was tall, she's beautiful, and she looks like a model, but she had poor performance in both of the challenges and a pretty bad walk. So, Gaston and Victoria are actually both eliminated. We technically went from 16 down to 12 in this first episode. Mary Alice tells us in confessional that she's pretty sure Mandy Lynn is not America's Most Smartest Model, but she has heart, so she's decided to make her personal project. The rest of the episodes in the show follow a pretty typical format. We open the show, maybe we see the contestants doing something, then they get the news about and then participate in the Edge Challenge for that episode, where the winner or team of winners gets an advantage. Then we have some time in between where the contestants are either reacting to how the Edge Challenge went or are causing conflicts with each other and carrying other plot lines forward, developing the relationships. Then we go to the callback challenge. We watch them participate in that. We see some setups potentially for who will be the winner and who will be going home. We usually get an evaluation and learn about the performance right after the callback challenge, so we already know by the time we get to elimination later who the winner of the week is and who will be staying. And then during elimination, they pull down typically a bottom 3, choose to save one, then choose to save the second and reveal who will be going home that episode. Pretty much follow that. So I'm going to kind of speed run through the remaining challenges for each episode just to kind of cover it all and then talk about all of the cast because each of them is kind of, like I said, an interesting character and says something both about the show and about reality competition shows in general. So, in episode 2, our remaining 12 models, again, have an Edge challenge and a callback challenge. The Edge is a trivia game where they compete in pairs to answer kind of like questions selected from like a Jeopardy-style board. And for every question they get correct, they can earn an item to take with them to the photo shoot that is the callback challenge. And the prizes include simple items such as cosmetics kits, makeup, costumes, outfits, body paint, but they also include very valuable things such as extra frames with the photographer, extra time with the photographer, access to a hairstylist and or a makeup artist. In the callback challenge, which is a photo shoot with celebrity photographer Robert Erdman, the contestants, the models, are in the same teams they were in for the Edge challenge, and they get 30 minutes to do their photo shoot, which also includes choosing their best photo. They get 1 hour of prep to prepare to figure out what they want to do and how they want to use the props that they won and the prizes and the benefits to help them with this photo shoot. Ultimately, 2 models, Rachel and Pickle, end up being the ones who win this, with a second close being Andre and Lisa, although interestingly, Mary Alice tells Andre and Lisa that their photo was not chosen specifically because it promotes violence against women, which Andre doesn't understand later. The elimination for this episode has a bottom 4 because they were competing in pairs. They got judged in pairs. It was Daniel, the PhD student, Mandy Lynn, the one who was in the bottom from the previous episode but got saved to be Mary Alice's pet project, Jesse, who starts getting a storyline here of being a little too heavy and needing to lose weight, and then Erica, who was the one who was ultimately eliminated. She really wasn't around that long. She was the really short one that didn't know how to walk properly, and Mary Alice tried to demand to have her in heels all the time, which she didn't commit to because she didn't quite understand. Episode 3, the Edge challenge for this one, they call it the Battle of the Bulge. It involves more trivia and also eating. So when the models arrive to the Edge challenge, they are placed at a station with their name, and they have silver platters with like those little domes that cover up the food on top of them. They have 3 platters. There'll be 3 rounds of questioning, where every time a model is asked a question, if they answer it correctly, they get to eat a healthy snack, like celery. And then they'll get asked a follow-up question. If they can answer the follow-up question correctly, they can force another contestant to eat an unhealthy snack. If the model does not answer their first question correctly, they also have to eat an unhealthy snack. So for round 1, the unhealthy snack is a Twinkie and the healthy one is a piece of celery. For round 2, the healthy snack is a rice cake and the unhealthy snack is a slice of chocolate cake. And then by the time we get to round 3, the unhealthy snack is a stack of pancakes with syrup, and the healthy one, I believe, is some orange slices. This is where we get a little diabolical and a little strategic with the models when they answer the questions correctly, choosing specific other contestants to deliver the unhealthy snacks to. Poor Andre has to end up eating like 3 or 4 pieces of chocolate cake. And here is also where we have a moment where Mandy Lynn refuses to eat the chocolate cake, barring her from competing in the callback challenge and immediately putting her up for elimination by the end of the episode. The callback challenge itself is a fitness tape audition with, I don't want to call him an influencer, but like fitness video expert and kind of like TV personality, Gilad. The models go through a bunch of exercises with Gilad, and he's looking at both their form and their energy, and also are they maintaining, the correct personality, and are they still looking like a model while doing all of it. He does all the exercises with them, and by doing this, he whittles them down to a top 2 that he then pits against each other for them to kind of lead sort of like a fake video fitness tape together, and this ends up with Brett being the winner, so this is his second win. Although Aussie Rachel, she's from Australia, was the runner-up here. In elimination for this episode, I'll just point this out, Andre gets called up first because he's been having trouble in the house at this point, and Mary Alice and Ben confront him about this, but then the bottoms are Jesse, Mandy Lynn, and blonde Rachel. There's 2 Rachels, they both have M last names, so we can't use their initials to differentiate, although they will call them like Rachel Myers and Rachel Murphy, I believe. But on the show, and everyone else kind of just calls them blonde Rachel and Aussie Rachel. Rachel ends up safe, Jesse ends up safe, but he's given a warning, and Mandy Lynn has great looks, no doubt, but Mary Alice is unsure about her being America's most smartest model, and she is eliminated after being in the bottom 3 times now. Episode 4, our Edge Challenge is a science fair. The models have to work in duos to build a science fair presentation and then present it not only to Mary Alice and to Ben Stein, but also to Bill Nye, who I did not expect to see at all on this show, but it does fit. And of course he is there being his normal kooky self. The models in pairs do presentations on theories of gravity, density flow, solar power, volcanics and geology, and magnetic levitation. The edge, the advantage for winning this was getting access to a spray tan booth for the callback challenge, which was first to make up a concoction of your own suntan lotion out of the various ingredients that were provided to them. Then each team had to take their suntan lotion and apply it to a, quote, gamer nerd who has been in their basement for a week playing World of Warcraft, which was specifically mentioned. They got a bunch of people come in, and each team had one of these nerds who were all very, very, like, pale. And then, of course, like, in contrast to the models, not conventionally attractive, right? And also, they don't know how to model. The teams, once they've put the sun tanning lotion on their models, given them this, their new models, given them this fake tan, they have to then take their nerd and pose with them in a photo shoot. For this one, Andre and Aussie Rachel end up being winners because they made one of the only suntan lotions that didn't look like it gave their nerd third-degree burns all over their body or a weird rash, and they also actually like posed and worked with their nerd very, very well. At the end of this episode, during elimination, Rachel, Jesse, and Lisa are all in the bottom. Blonde Rachel. Jesse is eliminated. Lisa and Rachel are saved. In episode 5, our Edge challenge here is dissecting fetal pigs, which I did in 9th grade biology class. That was a fun throwback. They have to dissect the pig, and they have to identify 9 organs and also cleanly extract them from the pig and place them on a display board to get evaluated and judged by a local high school science teacher who I guess just agreed to be on the show. This is cool. It's really particularly fun for one of the contestants, Angela, who has a degree in animal biology and works as a veterinarian. So she is so used to all this. Surprisingly, she doesn't win because one of her organs she plucked out wasn't quite as perfect as Daniel's, who did win. Daniel's edge for winning this is that for the callback challenge, which is to produce a 30-second commercial for lather body wash, Daniel does not have to do the commercial in cold water. He gets to do it in warm water. All the other models have to do it in very cold water. Some other details about that callback challenge. The models get 10 minutes to do as many takes as they can or want to do. And then also, each of the models have to choose one of the other contestants who will select the take to show to the judge, who is the director of brand management for Lather Modern Apothecary, the kind of brand deal product placement for this episode. VJ, who we haven't really talked about, I don't think I've mentioned him at all yet, is the winner of this episode. And he does so pretty sneakily, and I will talk about that in a bit. Blonde Rachel kind of flubs it here. She just does horribly at the commercial. And during the elimination, Mary Alice, I just want to point this out, she simply says, "I think you know which 2 I'd like to step down, so please come down." Lisa and Blonde Rachel come on down. It's kind of an iconic moment from Mary Alice, I'm not going to lie. I have to give her kudos for that. Lisa and Blonde Rachel then have a smart off where they're asked trivia questions, kind of rapid fire, and whoever answers it correctly and kind of gets a point. Rachel dominates here. Lisa just doesn't do well, and she's finally kicked off after trying to claim she has street smarts, and then Mary Alice says, or Ben asks her, "Okay, what's Mary Alice's last name?" And she says Alice. So she is out of here. This is the halfway point of the competition in terms of eliminating people, even though we're on episode 5 out of technically 11. Episode 6, I just like the name of this episode, Are You Ready to Rhombus? The Edge challenge here is they again are in pairs, although they get to pick their teams this time. They must construct an outfit using only 6 geometric shapes. So circle, triangle, rectangle, parallelogram, trapezoid, and pentagon. For the Edge challenge, in the first part, they must precisely create patterns for each of the shapes from directions given to them and cut them out of paper to make like sewing patterns, essentially. In the duos, one team member goes first and must complete 3 shapes before they can move on to the second team member to produce the other 3 shapes out of the 6. They are judged on the accuracy of the production, and if any of the measurements on the shapes are off, then they are not done yet. And who's judging them on this? Santino Rice from Project Runway at this point, because Drag Race had not started yet. There's your timeline placement for this show. This goes pretty poorly for some of them. The edge here is that whoever wins gets Santino's help in constructing and designing their garment that they must design, which they will then be modeling later. The winners also get to distribute which shapes the other teams are allowed to use. One team will get 3, one team will get 2, and the final team will only get 1 shape to use to design and implement into their outfit. They get 3 hours to make their garment, and they have the help of 2 student assistants because they're at some kind of like fashion school or something in the area. And then once they finish that, they don't see their garment again until the runway callback challenge. For this callback challenge, one of the models in each pair must model the outfit and walk the runway, while the other model must provide commentary and sell the outfit. Pretty simple, and honestly, probably the most direct model thing they've done so far, aside from just your standard photo shoots, although all of them have had some funky twists so far. By the end of the episode, we lose blonde Rachel. She's kind of just unceremoniously kicked off the show before we even get to the elimination. And then at the elimination, everyone's like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? What's going on? She even pulls down some of the contestants, and everyone's like, oh, she's going to eliminate another person, but she actually ends up saving everyone. And blonde Rachel, who was previously axed, is the only one eliminated. I do just want to point out, at one point, they're asking Daniel why he chose to work with Rachel, which kind of self-sabotaged him. And he's like, well, I was being nice. And Ben goes, well, this show is not America's most nicest model. Which, I'm just going to speculate. I don't know if he said that off the cuff. I don't know if someone told him to say that, or if he's a fan of America's Next Top Model. All I will say is Cycle 6, with Jade, did air in 2006. So we had This Is Not America's Next Top Best Friend race by this point. Episode 7. Before I get into the Edge Challenge, I want to talk a little bit about a setup here. They pulled a classic reality TV competition trope in this episode. They send the contestants out for a night in the town, a night off, to get them drunk and to see what shenanigans ensue. However, unlike most shows, this actually connects directly into the Edge Challenge for the episode, which did not go over well with a good amount of the models for this episode who had felt like they'd been tricked and made fun of and made into jokes because of this challenge. What they were tasked to do, again, while they think that they are just out to party and have a good time, is while they're at this club and many of them are already fairly drunk, Mary Alice has planted 6 fashion and modeling people in the party crowd who are then to talk to the model contestants, and the models, this is a test of their networking abilities. Yeah. It doesn't go well for most of them because, again, they're not expecting it, and they're also not sober and not fully, in the right mind space to do a challenge and to network with people. 2 of them do very, very well, but only one can be the winner for the advantage, which ends up being VJ. His advantage here is he gets to assign the time in front of the camera for the photo shoot at the callback challenge to the other models. So he gets to assign them to have either 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, or only 1 minute in front of the camera. VJ himself gets 30 minutes. During the callback challenge, they are doing a photo shoot for antique denim. They also, however, have to do the shoot with an animal. So either a horse, a mini donkey, a llama, a pygmy goat, a chicken, a pig, or an ostrich. And they get to choose the animal that they shoot with based on the order of the amount of time that they were assigned by VJ. Shooting with animals is always, I feel like it comes up often just because it's like an uncontrollable element and they have to do it somehow for each show, just because it's a pretty decent setup for a challenge. Andre, the Soviet, ends up being the winner of this challenge, and at the elimination, Daniel, the PhD student, is finally eliminated. Oh well. Episode 8, our Edge Challenge involves trivia and treadmills. So we're down to 6. So they pair off. The one member of each team answers a bunch of rapid-fire trivia questions, and however many they get correct, the running on the treadmill that the other teammate will have to do becomes easier. One of the teams only gets 10 questions correct, so their teammate has to run, their model has to run at level 9 on the treadmill, and the other 2 teams get 13 questions correct each, so their models start at level 6. Eventually, the winner for this does it because he kind of not cheats, but he plays the game kind of smartly and sneakily a little bit. Advantage for winning this edge challenge is you get the team got a closer position to use as a changing room for the runway challenge in the callback challenge. This one also had kind of a weird setup. I'll try to explain it as best as I can. The models have to do a runway. They have to do 3 looks each in the trios. So the 3 people who have the edge and then the 3 people who don't have the advantage. They have 30 minutes for all 3 models in the trio to walk all 3 looks. So that includes time spent walking the runway and changing outfits and getting back and walking the runway and repeat and whatnot. The edge was to have a changing room that is essentially right behind the runway. So you're right there, you're ready to go. Those who did not have the edge, instead their changing area is back behind the house, beyond the pool. That's where the rack of clothes is, and then to get back to the runway, they have to go through an obstacle course, which includes the walking on a narrow strip of material, like over the pool, doing monkey bars across some mud, etc. I will say the 3 guys who were at the disadvantage here actually had some incredible teamwork, and they managed to pull it off pretty well for at least the obstacle course part, but then when it got to the actual walking the runway and modeling, all 3 of them failed in some capacity. They were kind of just not good modeling or making really weird and bad decisions during their runway walk. In episode 9, for their Edge challenge, they are specifically tested on their engineering skills and ability. There's only 5 of them left, so in 2 duos and then 1 solo, they go to a garage, and they all have to construct a go-kart. They all have the same pieces and instructions, and they must construct a race-ready go-kart, which then has to be approved by a local mechanic before it is officially complete. The first 2 teams to finish their go-kart and get it approved will be the winners of that part of the challenge, and then they will race, and the winner of the race is the ultimate winners of the Edge challenge for that episode. The advantage won by the team that won this construction and then race is they got to drive back to the mansion in the new Jaguar, and then inside the Jaguar in the glove box was a pamphlet brochure containing information about the new 2007 Jaguar XKR convertible, which for the callback challenge, all of the models will be delivering a spokesperson presentation for that car. They go to the Jaguar dealership, they get briefed by 2 of the executives on a bunch of the specs and features of the cars, and then they have to deliver, again, a spokesperson presentation, not only in front of the typical judges of Mary Alice and Ben and the 2 executives from the dealership, but also an audience of who knows who else is there. It was about 20 to 30 people. What trips up most of them is that the car is on a turntable, and they all end up standing on the turntable, and so for 3 of them, the motion trips them up. The 2 who did the best very smartly either got off the turntable or used it to their advantage and used it as a stage that allowed them to walk without leaving the eyesight of their audience too far. The interesting thing about this callback challenge is if they won, they earned automatic entrance into the finale. And it was also a tie, it turned out, for the winner. So, 2 of this top 5 immediately gained entrance into the finale. And then another twist, Mary Alice decides to eliminate 2 people in this episode. And at first I was a little confused about why she decided to do this, but then when I kind of investigated it a bit further and I put the pieces together, I understand why. The next episode, which is technically 10 out of 11, is the finale. What I believe happened is they filmed everything that's shown to us in episodes 10 and 11 as one long double-length finale experience. And now when you can watch it, it's segmented into 2 different episodes. Although from what I can find online, it looks like these last 2 episodes were also aired a week apart. So ultimately, I really don't know what's going on there. But when I explain what we're about to see in these last 2 episodes, you'll get why I'm confused. So episode 10, we actually don't have an Edge challenge or a traditional one for this episode. The first thing we get is the models get picked up and taken to a different mansion to spend the night in the next challenge in Palm Springs. Mary Alice shows up and treats them to a dinner, and she uses this time to get to know the top 3 a little bit more personally. She also brings in 5 random models that she knows. These models are going to be helping our top 3 in a photo shoot the next day. So they have the evening to get to know them and chat with them and strategize and figure out who they want to work with. Because out of the top 3, when they choose which of the 5 models they want to have in their photo shoot, the other contestants don't have access to those models. So there's a little bit of strategy here. For the photo shoot itself, it's kind of like a multi-stage, multi-set photo shoot. Mary Alice says they're going rock and roll with it. That's kind of the theme. So they do some photos by the backyard and pool of this mansion with some guitars and some other instruments, and some kind of rocker outfits. They do a photo shoot inside that's supposed to be more emulative of kind of like a nice party of musicians and music industry people, essentially. We do, after this challenge, pare down from a top 3 down to a top 2. And then the top 2, after this elimination, and we're still in episode 10, they have the elimination, and there's like 10 minutes left. It's kind of like, what are we doing? They are informed, the top 2, that their final challenge will be to deliver a 5-minute multimedia presentation on why they should be granted the title of America's Most Smartest Model and be the winner of the show and all the prizes that come with it. So for the remaining 10 minutes, we're with the models and these assistants that they get to start helping them piece together their presentations. And then the episode ends, and then you go to the next episode, and we kind of just pick right back where we left off and immediately jump into it. So again, that's why I'm saying, it feels like episodes 10 and 11 were all filmed in one big piece and then parsed out into 2 different episodes. And I guess they just didn't quite have enough footage to make episode 10 end on just the elimination of that 3rd place contestant. And we had that weird last 10 minutes in there. Anyway then, the final episode mostly focuses on the top 2 assembling their presentations, delivering their presentations, lots of judge deliberations, and then one final round of basically, why should you be the winner? Though Ben Stein, when he requests this final little debate discussion among the top 2, doesn't really take it in the direction. He actually asks them to kind of debate sort of a more philosophical idea about the essence of modeling and how it shouldn't always come down to the face and the figure and the physicality, but more so also the character and the spirit, which when I get into who the top 2 are, that is a very funny thing to have them attempt to discuss, considering everything they've done on this show and their behavior and their attitudes. It finishes, it wraps up, they select their winner, they send off the guy who got second, show ends. This final episode does also serve as a bit of a pseudo clip montage recap, because as the top 2 are making their presentations, they're explaining events that transpired on the show to these assistants and why they're important. And then also, when the winner is selected, we get a montage of clips played of all of the successes he has had throughout the show. The winner, even though I'm about to go over all the contestants, was VJ. So, as I mentioned when I covered episode 1, we had gone from 16 down to 12. We had lost contestants Slavko and Jamie in the very first cut, and then after the first challenges, we had lost contestants Victoria and Gaston. Them, honestly, along with Erica, really weren't there long enough to make any kind of useful impression, except for Gaston being gross, Victoria being not very smart, and Erica not being model enough to stick around. And that's really it. That's what happens when you're only around for 1 or 2 episodes. But hey, somebody has to go home first, and second, and third and fourth and fifth in this case. The 11th place contestant, the one who was eliminated next, was Mandy Lynn. Her characterization in this show, as a model, and as someone who had allegedly done some modeling work prior to this, was she was made to mostly just be an object. She was very conventionally attractive, to the point where there was some kind of creepiness from Ben Stein whenever she was around. But she seemed really, I go back to this word earnest again, about participating in this competition and trying to win it and do the best she can. She did have low placements, being in the bottom the entire run on the show, But Mary Alice wanted to make her own pet project. I guess Mary Alice saw some kind of interesting potential in Mandy Lynn that pushed her to keep her around as long as she could. Mandy Lynn, however, ended up being a little bit of a self-sabotager in the third episode when she wouldn't participate in the Edge challenge properly, and then this barred her from competing in the callback challenge. Something I left out in that is she actually did go and participate in the sort of video workout exercise challenge stuff, at least for 5 minutes, and then she kind of gave up. And also as part of that episode, because she wasn't really supposed to participate in that, Mary Alice had actually tasked her with dyeing her own hair from this kind of blonde, brown, streaky mess into just straight brown, just brunette. And that was supposed to be also kind of a smartness challenge for her, because she had not done well in any of the intelligence tasks, and she'd only been, again, saved by Mary Alice when it came to the modeling stuff. So if she could dye her hair with the instructions with no help, maybe that would show some promise. And she did do it, and then she got eliminated. So that's kind of sucks. It was interesting, though, to see her, someone be in the bottom so often so early on, and every time she got in the bottom 3 and then saved, at least one or two of the other contestants would make a comment in confessional about like, oh, I thought Mandy Lynn was going to go home, instead of whoever else actually went home. But she did finally get kicked out in that third episode. The next contestant who got kicked out, eliminated, 10th place, was Jesse. Jesse's entire storyline on the 4 episodes of the show was that he needs to lose weight. He has a little bit of a tummy. He's a little bit softer than all of the other male models that are here. And from episode 1, Mary points this out, and she says, you got to lose that weight. And then it's kind of this annoying thing that's held over him the rest of the time in the competition. I don't know the filming timeline. They are, saying like, okay, we'll see you in next week's. It seems to be every now and then they'll do an Edge and a callback on different days, depending on how long the Edge takes. But sometimes the way they talk about it, they allude to them happening within the same day. So it can be hard to tell exactly how much time elapsed from the start of filming to when Jesse was eliminated at the end of episode 4. But it's definitely not enough time for him to actually have any considerable change in his physical appearance regarding how much he weighs. Even if he was working out every day and starving himself and doing it dangerously, it wouldn't even really be enough time for him to change that. The only way for him to have been able to have that much of a physical transformation in that short period of time would have been for him to like drastically dehydrate himself. Kind of the same way that like bodybuilders do before they do their competitions. So that's his entire experience on the show. He has some times where he like argues a little bit with some of the other contestants, and in particular the episode where he ends up getting eliminated, the callback challenge with the nerds and the suntan lotion, he feels like he was sabotaged by VJ because they were doing the photo shoot together, and VJ made a point to put himself kind of more front and center in the photo and leave Jesse kind of in the background. And when he brings this up, and actually Andre brings this up too and tries to come to his defense, Mary Alice and Ben are just kind of like, listen, VJ's playing smartly. So that's how Jesse ends up getting kicked out, and that was his whole experience. The next contestant is Lisa, and she was honestly just kind of someone who was there and then someone who was gone. She did have one high placement in episode 2 as one of the top photos of that photo shoot with Andre, but they did not win again because in that photo, Andre was like simulating strangling Lisa with a string of pearls, and again, Mary Alice did not want to select a photo that promotes violence against women as the winner of that challenge. Other than that, Lisa was just kind of there. She wasn't really making any progress on like improving her knowledge for the intelligence challenges, and then she wasn't really standing out as everyone else was when it came to the modeling. And this happens to a few other contestants. If you're not, top of the pack, if you're just mediocre the whole time, eventually you end up in the bottom against someone who does better, which means you're going home. Lisa is a little bit atypical from that pattern in the sense that she got eliminated because of the smart off with blonde Rachel, and she just couldn't answer any of the questions that Rachel was nailing. so she got axed that way. But honestly, unfortunately, Lisa's experience was a little forgettable. She did have one good fight with Andre in episode 2, and that's kind of it. I honestly felt bad because for a couple of episodes, when I didn't have the names on the screen, I would confuse her with Aussie Rachel. And then confuse myself because I'm like, wait a minute, is Lisa the one with the accent? Or is Rachel the one with the accent? So, that's just on me. And maybe some commentary about the disposability of women on reality TV. 8th place went to blonde Rachel. Again, she was the one who kind of just got kicked out rather unceremoniously. She had 3 low placements before getting kicked off the show, so she definitely deserved it by that point. She also fell into the you're mediocre and everyone else is improving and rising above, and now it's your time to go, essentially. There are some rumors I saw online that Rachel specifically was also kicked out because, and we saw plenty of footage of this, she was developing a budding physical and romantic relationship with contestant VJ. Sure, it can happen. Everyone kind of like joked about it and talked about it in confessionals and made comments. And anytime they teamed up, everyone was like, oh, yep, we saw that coming. And there's a rumor that because of that, and that's all she became focused on, and she even said that in her confessionals, she's like, oh, I'm so excited I didn't get eliminated, I get to spend more time with VJ. You know, that production basically was like, you're not giving us any good usable footage of actually like participating in the competition and taking it seriously, so it's your time to go. 7th place elimination was Daniel. Daniel was the PhD student. He had gone to Duke. I don't remember where he was at for his PhD off the top of my head, but he was doing it in psychology. In his time, he had 2 low placements and just all safe placements, although he was the winner of the 1st and 4th and 5th episode Edge challenges, so he had plenty of advantages granted to him. Daniel's main plot line in the show is that while he is very, very smart and he does great at the intellectual challenges, it's a question as to whether his ability is there for the modeling and if he's kind of all in on it. He's fairly young. He's 23 and turns 24 over the course of filming the show. So in terms of experience, you know, it's kind of questionable. Also, he is a PhD student, and I did find an interview with him from Duke's like school newspaper about his experience on the show, and he did say, you know, yeah, the modeling thing was more of a hobby to him. Although I think he still does do modeling now. I was able to find some pages on modeling agencies and management's websites about him and his stats and how you would get a hold of him if you wanted to use him in whatever project you're doing. The other main thing with Daniel is that he ends up constantly in conflict with Andre. Andre is the Soviet, Russian, Romanian model that I will get to later. We have a lot to say about Andre. Daniel does not like Andre's personality, the way he handles things, the way he talks to people, the way he acts around women, so many things. They're just bitter. I don't even call them rivals because Andre doesn't even view Daniel as a rival, and I think Daniel just views Andre as a villain. But they're constantly at each other from the beginning. Another thing is that Daniel is really characterized as complaining a lot. And when things don't go his way, he is very vocal about it, and he will let you and everyone around know it. To the point where in the episode where it was his birthday, which is the one where he ends up going home, he, after the embarrassment that was the Edge challenge, which is the one in the club where they got all drunk, but then they were supposed to network. After they completed that challenge, the contestants who were there, still there, were then faced with Mary Alice and the 5 people she brought that are fashion industry professionals, and they asked them questions about, like, well, so whose names do you know? What do they do? Did you get any cards? How was your networking? And Daniel bombed this completely, understandably, because he was partying hard for his 24th birthday. And then when I got back to the mansion, there's a lot of extra footage of him, like, actually raging about this experience, throwing stuff around, slamming doors, shouting, all these things. So that was his characterization on the show. I think is a little unfortunate because he seemed to like do decently, and for sometimes it looked like he was having a pretty fun time. But he also got dragged down by trying to be nice and pair up with blonde Rachel in the episode where she gets eliminated, and that's what pulled him into a low placement that episode. Our sixth place is a model who goes by the name Pickle. That's his last name. I believe his first name is Jeff. Pickle does pretty well throughout the competition. He had 2 wins, both from working with another partner, and then he had 1 other high placement, again working with another partner. His problem, once we finally get to him being eliminated, is that all of his successes in a competition came from him working with someone else. Even the wins in the Edge challenges, they were all team Edge challenges. He never won anything on his own. So that's his problem. And then when it came down to finally trying to do something on his own and have an individual competition, he wasn't able to hold up to the same standards as everyone else, and he got eliminated. His characterization, he is one of our regular narrators. He's a bit of a yapper. He talks a lot, but he's one of those personalities that you're kind of like, you know what? I like listening to him. He's really good at delivering story narration and also his own opinions on things. So again, we get a lot of narration from Pickle throughout his time there, up through the end of episode 8. Our 5th place and 4th place contestants were eliminated in the same episode. They were the double elimination in episode 9. So one of them is Aussie Rachel. She's from Australia. She does pretty well in the competition. She does have 2 wins, one being a team win with Pickle, and then the other one being a team win with Andre later on. But then she also has 2 both of her high placements she also earned on her own. However, later in the latter half of the season, in episodes 6 and 7, she had low placements, and Mary Alice's critiques to her start to become, listen, you were strong at the beginning, and you have a lot of potential. Excellent modeling skill, and she did pretty well in some of the Edge challenges as well, proving that she had the intellect, but towards the middle of the competition, she started to wane, and she started to get weaker. And she managed to pull it out in episode 8, when Angela had also been given a very similar critique, who we'll talk about in a moment, and they both were saved, and Angela won in that episode. But in the 9th episode, she unfortunately just wasn't doing enough, wasn't model enough, was making mistakes, and Mary Alice ended up sending her home. Brett was our 4th place. He had 3 wins overall. He was also a really good front runner. The winner of the very first episode, the winner of the 3rd episode, and the winner of the 6th episode. And then he also had a high placement in episode 4. Brett's a cool guy. He's one of the only ones who post-show actually has some really regular modeling work. He's done both, like, underwear modeling, and I think he also was in a Taco Bell commercial at one point. So he's got things going pretty well for him. He's fun to watch. He's pretty good. He's nothing super extraordinary about his personality. He was just good at the game. Until, again, he got to the very end, and then a couple slip-ups, and then you're in the bottom, and then you're gone, just because everyone else is who they want to save instead. And when you're at that point, in the top 5, the top 2 were very, very interesting contestants and competitors in terms of both their attitudes and behaviors and the story that they had experienced throughout the competition, especially with each other. And then the other person who joined into the top 3, Angela, had really launched herself to the top right near the end. The best comparison I can think of for Angela, who I guess I'll just start talking about now, is actually Naomi Smalls from season 8 of Drag Race. When I watched season 8, which is one of my favorite seasons, I kind of like don't even recognize that Naomi is there until we get to near the very end and we have that Wizard of Oz challenge where she wins. And then all of a sudden she's like in the top for the rest, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, who's this? You know, and you're like pleasantly surprised, and she launches herself all the way to the top 3, right? And then going on to do All-Stars later on and whatnot. She kind of reminds me of that, Angela does. She coasts through the first half of the season. I remember in my notes I put a few times, I was like, who is Angela? She won the like Science Fair Edge challenge with Daniel, which was cool, and then she had a high placement in episode 5. She was low in episode 7 along with Rachel. That's when both of them kind of got the talking to by Mary Alice to like, hey, you need to step it up, and they did. And then Angela had 2 wins in a row. She won episode 8 and episode 9, so she was definitely like, again, launched herself to be a front runner. But then unfortunately she kind of got in her head and reached the limit of her modeling skill as it pertains to this competition in the penultimate episode, episode 10. During the photo shoot, the rock and roll themed photo shoot, she reveals to us that she also has a passion for music, and in kind of the setting with the instruments, and she had access to a microphone, she kind of let that out a little bit more, and that definitely didn't play into her favor. It distracted her from being able to do well in the modeling aspect and take good photos. She ended up being very posy, and Mary Alice just didn't like it, so she decided to eliminate Angela. But Angela was a pretty fun contestant, and she was pretty good to watch, especially once they started giving her more screen time, like in the challenges and in the in-between segments and in the confessionals. Once we started to eliminate people with slightly bigger personalities, and they were gone, and they were like, well, now we need to fill the time with the people we have left, Angela got some more time to shine, and she actually was able to prove herself. I also just want to point out, Angela was the only black woman contestant in the show, and I didn't mention this earlier, but Jesse was also the only black man who was in the show. Everyone else is pretty much white, or maybe an ambiguous mixed, but they were the only two black contestants. Our top two are Andre and VJ. They're the ones who make it all the way to the end. They're the ones who have to do the presentations against each other to defend why they should be the winner of the title of America's most smartest model at the end of the show. Like I said, VJ ends up winning, so Andre ends up getting a runner-up. But they're kind of at each other's throats for most of the competition. But also everyone else is at their throats as well. Andre starts off the show immediately with everyone disliking him. He's from Romania. He was born in the Soviet Union, and then he came to the United States when he was 18, I believe in 1996 or 97, if I understand his timeline properly. And he's the one who has the most just like raw fashion model experience. He's done runways. He's done plenty of photo shoots. He knows what he's doing. He has the talent. And he does show it off well. And there's plenty of times where he is applauded for his modeling skill, although he tends to make really odd decisions, such as in one challenge when he's walking the runway, the one where they have to do the 3 looks, he like winks at Mary Alice and blows her a kiss, and Mary Alice is like, listen, don't ever do that was horrible. And he doesn't like understand. He's like, but I've done that before and it was fine. And that's kind of Andre's thing here. And a lot of this I think just comes down to like cultural differences. He, at the beginning, doesn't get along well with anyone because everyone else is American except for one of the Rachels, who's Australian. But the Australians are pretty similar to the Americans in this regard, whereas his experiences and his personality and his like beliefs, based on what he had learned growing up in Romania, Eastern Europe, Soviet and post-Soviet Union, are very different than the Americans. And so he struggles constantly with ideas of like American individualism, but also ideas of teamwork, what it means to be open and vulnerable and the benefits that might come with that. People get on his nerves all the time, complaining. He can't stand it. Like, he can't stand Daniel, the complainer. He couldn't stand when Elisa was complaining just about like the temperature early on in the show. However, he also, like, while he's struggling to adapt to the personalities of the Americans, he also, you can tell, just is not prepared for what American reality TV competition is. He spends a good amount of energy, both like during and post challenges and in eliminations and in confessionals, complaining about the legitimacy and the integrity and the fairness of the challenges, to the extent where he will even complain when there's no benefit to him. There's no like possible way to change the outcome. In the pig dissection edge challenge, one of them, they were supposed to, like, all the pigs were supposed to be male. One of them was allegedly female, which would have made that contestant's time at the challenge technically easier because one of the organs they were supposed to identify and extract was the testicles. Angela, being the veterinarian and animal biology expert, wanted to investigate that female pig when they were done, and she did actually find out that it was actually male. But this doesn't change the outcome of the challenge because A, it was already decided, and for that particular contestant who had the allegedly female pig, she scored so lowly in that challenge that having that change, and so did Andre, wouldn't change anyone's placements, wouldn't change the outcome of who the winner was. But Andre, to him, he was like, well, that's not fair. That's like, the outcome is different now. So he like made it this whole huge thing, and that was kind of, again, his experience with everything. It did serve him well, though, because while he started off as everyone's least favorite person in the house because he was just constantly bullying people, yelling at them, he had a lot of misogynistic and sexist remarks to all of the female contestants. He eventually started standing up for the other contestants when, in particular, VJ, who won the competition, started playing really sneakily. VJ, in some of the Edge challenges, the group would be provided reference materials to start studying over, such as an anatomy book to prepare them for the pig dissection challenge, or an encyclopedia to prepare them for the trivia game Edge challenges. VJ, in both instances, took the reference materials and ran off with them and hid them, so that he was the only one who was able to study them. VJ also, during the shower commercial callback challenge, each group only got access to the script for the commercial, each little duo, one at a time. They had to pass around the one script to share. So while one team was practicing the lines and reading the script, VJ strategically just sort of hung out near them so that he could listen in and start learning the lines earlier before he had access to the script. The other contestants didn't like that he was doing this, and when that happened, Andre was the one to kind of speak up and try to complain about it and bring it to Mary and Ben's attention. However, in that moment, both Mary and Ben and even Matt, the brand director, who was the judge for that challenge, were all like, he's just playing the game well. He's just doing a good job. Sometimes you got to take advantages where you get them, or make advantages when you don't have them. Later on, VJ also, for the Jaguar challenge, once he finds out that that's what they're doing, he uses the phone that the contestants have access to call outside to the real world, which we only see then, and then one episode later when Angela's using it, very briefly in the background, which is interesting to me. I guess not enough cool things happened with the phone for us to get shown any of that, but VJ calls one of his friends on the outside to basically go do research for him and then report back, so he has a lot more information about the car. VJ also sort of cheats a little bit at the treadmill's Edge challenge when he's the one who has to run. He uses the treadmill itself to kind of prop himself up to make it easier when they are running for over an hour straight. All this stuff is stuff that Andre could not stand at all, and he made his opinion known. However, it was basically all for naught. Mary Alice was like, listen, he's playing the game smartly. This is what a smart model does, and a smart contestant does. And we're, again, looking for America's most smartest model. Including even in the very final photo shoot, that 10th episode one, the rock and roll theme one, with the other models, Andre had selected 2 female models that he wanted to work with in the photo shoot, but because VJ stepped in and kind of claimed them officially first, Andre only had access to the one remaining model, even though they had talked about it and Andre was dead set on having those 2 models. Mary Alice previously told Andre to bring concerns to her rather than just fighting with the other contestants, and so he tried to actually talk to Mary Alice, pull her aside and be like, hey, this isn't fair. I wanted to work with those models, and VJ took them from me. And Mary Alice just goes, okay, well, you're an adult. You'll figure it out. She was so done with him by this point in the competition. Mary Alice was so done with Andre that she was not doing him any favors. She was not going to help him at all. And in part, I believe the people online who were kind of saying that VO5 had already picked VJ early on to be the winner of the show. And so Mary Alice playing into that was like, well, I'll do what I can to help VJ, and I'll do what I can to stop Andre from putting himself in a position where I have to consider that he could actually be the winner instead, based on performance in the show. But also I think Mary Alice just didn't like him. He was always complaining. He was always talking back. Again, he was often making misogynistic and sexist comments towards all of the women. But I will say he made for some damn good TV. He was a great, quote-unquote, villain for most of the other contestants on the show. It was really easy to kind of rally around everyone else who didn't like him at the beginning. And then it was a very surprising twist to honestly kind of root for him, because VJ started being really annoying. Not only was VJ playing sneakily, he also just showed his whole ass because he started getting a real bad attitude and would antagonize Andre and some of the other contestants. I didn't mention this at all. Here's, I guess, a good time to mention it. Once we got towards the final six, final 7, 4 of them tried to form an alliance. Pickle, Rachel, Brett, and Andre. Against specifically Angela and VJ to try to get them out. Very funny enough, the first episode of the alliance is like officially in action. Angela and VJ end up winning the episode. So that kind of backfired. But, it got to the point where literally everyone else in the house was against VJ because of how bad he was also acting. Not only in the competition, but just like as a person as well. I've also been mostly talking about VJ here, so I do just want to mention the really big thing about VJ and what kind of his characterization throughout the show, in addition to being like, oh, look how smart he's being by playing the game in a very sneaky and advantageous way. He was the youngest contestant, and he was also the one who had the lowest amount of, the least modeling experience. He only had 5 or 6 months under his belt when he joined the show at the start, so he was made out to be our underdog from the beginning. Everyone's going to doubt him. Everyone's like, well, we've got more experience than you. Everyone's older than him. He, told us a few times he came from like a rough childhood background and everything. And so that, you had that. And again, there's also the rumors that VO5 had kind of already pre-selected him, or maybe a couple of episodes in had selected him to be the ultimate winner. Who's to say, but you can definitely tell that as the show goes on and if you watch it. And I do recommend watching it. This was a fun one to watch. And I like that it's on Tubi. You can go watch it for free. There were definitely parts where like you could tell strings were being pulled to make sure VJ did at least well. Or well enough so that he wouldn't be eliminated, or that whoever else was in the bottom did so considerably worse that they had no choice but to eliminate that person. That's our cast. I just thought it was very interesting how they were all handled and like the editing around all of them and how each of them kind of had like a very specific story, and then also how like mean the show was to a lot of them. Mandy Lynn, Jesse, Lisa, Blonde Rachel, Daniel, the show was all like mean to all of them, either like through objectification or just a bad storyline that had to do with things out of their control, or just making a fool of them. Which again, when I first like kind of read up on the show and I was like expecting a very mean show, and then for 2 episodes I was willing to be like, oh wait, this show is actually earnest. What Mary Alice and the producers are trying to do here is kind of disprove a stereotype in a weird way through reality competition, kind of like a social experiment of some kind, which I would know about because that's what I used to do and still kind of do professionally. But, and then that completely left. And you can kind of tell at like the halfway point, the show starts kind of crumbling around itself and melting into some weird, I don't even know what to call it, some kind of thing that is not your standard reality competition, but is so emblematic of the genre at the same time, with like how the contestants are handled and this kind of setups and behind the scenes control. I will say, again, also on VJ's selection as the winner, the show wasn't really looking for the smartest model. They were, like all competition shows, what they were actually looking for was someone who could play the game well, which is why I do also think VJ was ultimately selected. I will also say, again, internet rumors, things I've read on YouTube comments and on Reddit and such, VJ got the $100,000 prize, but he did not do the contract with VO5. My hypothesis here is that with how badly he ended up portrayed on the show and how everyone turned on him, but then in the last 2, you have the sneaky guy who kind of got into shouting matches, but was the underdog, and then you had the guy with the like true, real modeling experience resume, but everyone really didn't like him, and he's kind of questionable with his opinions on just about anything, and also he had some very strange criminal charges around the same time. When it comes down to who you're going to select to kind of be a face for your company, I get when you actually don't really want to go with either. So I would definitely understand if VO5 was like, we'll pay out the money, but we're not giving you the modeling contract because after this show, we don't want our brand associated with that. And I also understand why Mary Alice would then not want to pick Andre at all, because she did say a few times in the competition, and it's interesting because these hosts and judges don't usually say this out loud. This is a thing that's kind of left silently. Maybe they'll say it later. Who knows? Mary Alice did say a few times that the winner of this competition and the decisions that are made on this show are attached to her. They represent her. So she has to pick, at the end, America's Most Smartest Model, she has to make a very wise call about who she's going to pick and who she thinks can handle the title well and carry on her reputation without damaging either of their reputations with their decisions and future modeling career and behaviors. All that is why I found this show very interesting. I did again find it entertaining, and it was fun to watch. A good 11 episodes of late 2000s schlocky reality TV competition from VH1 nonetheless. VH1 makes some very bizarrely fun and a little cringe reality shows around that time. Others that I've talked about on my podcast, such as Scream Queens. But it's, interesting. I guess, at the end of the day, does it really matter if we try to dispel the stereotype of the dumb model? Like the premise of this show. Obviously, the premise of the show is to make an entertaining show. Like, that was the purpose and the goal. The premise of what we're told the show is, why the competition aspect exists, is to dispel that myth and try to find someone who is not only a good model, but also has the intelligence to back it up, and they can do both. They are well qualified in both areas of their skills. Does that matter? The people who are going to use that stereotype of models against them, they won't care about this show or anything any model has to say. It's just funny to me when you have like this entire experience and you have all this stuff around it, and then you think about it and you're like, what was the point of any of that? And I can tell you the point. Money, product placement, entertainment. There was a lot of product placement in this show. The final episode, out of nowhere, the prize that Andre got for having the best photos at the rock and roll photo shoot was he got a new Sony Ericsson phone that Ben Stein had to then stand there and deliver a whole product placement ad read, essentially, for. And they had Andre, use the phone. But that's been America's Most Smartest Model. I'll say it one more time. I've said it over and over again. You can watch it on Tubi. I recommend it. It was such a neat little gem to find, especially amid many other model shows. You can almost call it a little bit of a parody of America's Next Top Model, but I don't think Mark Cronin and Chris Abrigo and Mariana Stevenson were really trying to parody Next Top Model. I think they just saw models becoming a hot topic in media and TV culture, and they said, let's do something with that. But thank you so much for listening to this installment of the recap episode. Please, it would help out me and the show if you could like and follow and rate the podcast or the episode on your preferred podcast platforms, be it Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you like to listen. You can also follow the pod on social media on Instagram at The Recap Episode or YouTube at The Recap Episode Pod. And with that, it is now time for me to wait for a future Netflix documentary exposing the model experience on this show.